introducing our moderator, Mark Carlson. Mark is a partner at Baker Donelson, one of the top law firms here in Atlanta and Southeast. Mark heads the mergers and acquisitions practice. He's been doing this since the late 90s in Silicon Valley and here in Atlanta, Georgia. And without further ado, Mark, come on up and let's get the show on the road.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you at Mobility Live. I appreciate the GSMA presentation, and I don't know if anybody pulled down the what's it called, the pamphlet, or it's actually a little longer than a pamphlet, that was linked to the invitation to this event. But a lot of those booklets have, I guess, information that's less enjoyable to read. It's not quite so insightful. I actually started reading it the other day, and there's this quote that I really liked, and I'm going to read it. It's from the GSMA booklet, but I think it leads well into the discussion we're going to have tonight. The mobile industry has also played a crucial role in the global economy as an innovation platform for new services. Mobile networks provide unique opportunities to reach new customers and to monetize products and services. The industry has enabled the emergence of a number of innovation hubs across the world, Atlanta as an aside. These mobile innovation ecosystems contribute to the empowerment of individuals and societies, not only through the opportunities they create, but also through the solutions and services they deliver. There's hope for you, Christian. I think in the second quarter, there's $13.8 billion venture dollars invested in the United States. 15% of that went to mobile and telco. And the reason that happens is because of the innovation. It's the tip of the spear, if you will. I'm maybe a little more simplistic than my panel. I tend to think of this in bigger, clunkier ways, but I think of the grocery store. And the modern grocery store wouldn't exist without one of the greatest inventions of mobility, which is the car. And everybody likes to go to Las Vegas. Las Vegas would not exist without one of the greatest inventions in mobility, the airplane. And what we're here to talk about and figure out is what is going to be invented and created by the smartphone, which is one of the coolest things. I have my fuel band, I've got a wearable. These are two of my three favorite possessions. My fuel band, my iPhone, and my guitar are the three things I love the most. And to be on that list and have two of them be wireless proves how cool and how fun and innovative the technologies and applications we get out of them. But we're going to talk a lot about infrastructure tonight, because one reason is because we don't talk about it all that much in this forum, and two, because as all the panelists will demonstrate, there are potential limitations on innovation coming forward based on the economics of the infrastructure for wireless technologies, but also because that is what drives the ability of the network, is what drives the potential innovations in this space. So I'm going to ask the panelists to all come up. I've got a huge amount of respect for the people who are going to speak tonight. Usually the moderator's job is to make their panelists look good. I've told them their job is actually not to make me look bad, because they're all so smart and accomplished in this area. But I'm going to ask all three of you to come up now, if you don't mind, and just so we can come up to your seats, please. And each of them is going to give you a short presentation on a topic that leads into our panel discussion. And for the sake of time, I'll let each of them introduce themselves individually at the beginning of their presentation. So Lutao, if you don't mind coming over.
Good evening. My name is Lutao Ning. I'm a principal here in Atlanta with the Boston Consulting Group. I've been spending pretty much the entirety of my career working in technology, media, and telecom. And the interesting part about this is many years ago, the partners at BCG decided to mash all three of them together into one practice area. And I would say 10 years ago that might not have made as much sense, but now you look at it and it seems quite brilliant, since all three have come pretty close to convergence, and the way this ecosystem is progressing over the next umpteen number of years, and you'll see as we get into the content that I brought, is very much hinged on the fact that all three work in concert. And given the way that the infrastructure and investments that major telcos are making, this is going to be an area where they have to start looking into the other two parts of that combo. But given my career over the last number of years, I've spent time doing M&A type of work, due diligences, a number, I want to feel like it's a number of years ago, but it's really last year, we took Dell private, which was a pretty big move in the industry. We've spent time looking at a variety of infrastructure builds for the major telcos. And we've done quite a bit of work on the Internet of Things, wearables, and et cetera. And the work that we're going to be showing here is going to be a reflection of all those pieces coming together. So let me jump right into it, because I understand I'm supposed to be talking fast, so I can give my friends over here a little bit of time also. So I think one of the key starting points behind all of this is that if you look at the major telcos as a whole, and the way that they've looked at their growth profile in the last number of years is that there were feature phones, and right behind that there were going to be smartphones, and with smartphones there's a tremendous amount of revenue growth from data plans, from device sales, etc. But if you look at their growth profile over the last couple of quarters, that's starting to run out. Pretty much everyone in this room likely has a smartphone. Some of you might have 2 of them. And the reality is that the US is reaching a saturation point. I think, similarly speaking, on the revenue side, you've seen a major amount of rejiggering of the data plans and the changing of the way people buy that. But as you look at T-Mobile's push on the shared data plans and the way that they're cutting prices, that fuel for the growth engine is also slowing. And as a result, what you see in the very last quarter is that the service revenue year-on-year growth for the major telcos is ostensibly 0. That's a major problem. And that's an area for concern for everybody involved. And part of the way that they're going to rebalance it is to look for alternative paths to revenue outside of just the consumer. So we've seen this before. One of the major shifts within this is the fact that the revenues aren't coming from voice anymore. I think we know that everything is data, everything is driven OTT, and over the course of the next couple of years you're going to realize that the voice as well as the messaging services that you have on your phone are no longer going to be running over the traditional minutes/messages type of plans. It's all going to be running off of the data. And as a result of that, the fact that the revenue growth after all the changing of the data plans is coming down to 0 is of even greater concern. So what are they going to do about this? I think there's a number of paths that they can take, and all of these are really going to be focused on the fact that they're going to bring other folks into the ecosystem to actually contribute revenue in addition to just the consumers who are using the data. The first piece I'll talk about is channelization of apps. And this is a pretty interesting and evolving set of business decisions that are happening today. One of the interesting parts about it is that players like the startup that we heard about earlier, Metrotech, if this type of ecosystem continues to grow, how much are they going to have to actually foot the bill for the infrastructure? It is a large and open question. The second component is the Internet of Things. And as we know before, if we think about every single one of us having a cell phone, that's one device of a person. But if every one of us has a cell phone and a wearable and a connected car and a fridge at home that has a wireless signal in it to tell you, you need to go get more milk, that's dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of devices that need to connect to this network. Suddenly the use of data explodes and grows in exponential ways. And once again, it might not be the consumer who's actually paying for that data. And then I think the third component is the SMB connectivity. If we think about how we are working today versus how we would have worked 10, 20 years ago, a lot of things have moved to the cloud, a lot of things have moved to telepresence, and the ability to serve that type of infrastructure wirelessly is ultimately going to need the cellular data. And in the same way that SMBs have been charged in a different rate for wireline connectivity in the past, so too is there an opportunity here. So in terms of the partnerships to differentiate and to increase the data use, one of the really interesting things, as you see, a very good example of this is in music services on the phones. So AT&T with Beats, you've seen T-Mobile across all of those music services, Sprint with Spotify, etc. What they're doing is giving all the consumers the ability to actually stream their music on the phone. And when they stream their music, they don't have to pay for, or either they don't have to pay for the data itself, or they're getting preferential rates on the streaming service. What's actually happening behind the scenes is that Spotify, Beats, Pandora, all these players are actually having negotiations with the major telcos on who ends up paying for the data stream. And as a result, there's a secondary set of revenues that can be taken out of this. Now, if you look at data usage, what's the most data-hungry devices and apps out there? It's YouTube, it's music streaming services, it's things that actually are running for hours a day on those devices. And in the future, that's going to actually grow exponentially in terms of use as more folks go on to these services. Now, the challenge behind all this is if it evolves this way, it essentially creates a toll bridge. So there's going to be the ones who have and the ones who have not. So Netflix is going to be able to pay for this all day long, but the startup who is just trying to get their feet under them and trying to get their product launched is going to have a much harder time getting into this ecosystem, because essentially each app is turning into a channel. And it's a channel that is very reminiscent of pay TV channels that we have today. So while it's beneficial for the major telcos, they have another path to this, it's also beneficial to the established players. But the real question is, how data hungry is the next piece of innovation, and can they still work in this ecosystem given where this is headed? I think the second component of this is around the Internet of Things, and lots of folks have been talking about this, and if you look at just the pure number of devices that are out there, you can see a pretty staunch exponential growth rate here, and we think that this entire ecosystem is going to grow to around $15 to $22 billion by 2016. This is driven by lots of players trying to put connectivity into every device they make, from appliance manufacturers to car manufacturers. And the ability to actually connect all these devices to create services that work within the profile of your life is going to be highly attractive going forward. Now, given that explosion of devices, it means that there's also an explosion of plans. And the best part about this is, for the most part, the companies are the ones paying for the data. So if you look at someone like Tesla, they're putting out the really fancy electric cars, and it has this gigantic LCD screen on it that gives you maps and traffic and all those good things. And at the beginning they were thinking, I'm going to charge my customers, but in reality, they are just splitting the bill for that data. Now, will that actually change in the future is TBD, but folks have really enjoyed having that, and at the same time, the consumer response to it is, I already have my cell phone, why do I need to pay for another stream of data on the side? And there's a lack of willingness from a consumer perspective to actually go pay for those extra streams of data. As a result, how these services are ultimately going to be delivered is that the companies who are making the service and making the device that has that connectivity are going to end up partnering and paying for those pieces of for those streams of data with the telcos. And I would just add that in terms of the opportunity, this extends pretty far beyond just the items that I talked about before, but it extends across the entire value chain, from anyone from the beginning part of it in terms of the connectivity all the way through service distribution models, etc. I think the third component of all this is SMB, and I think we've spent a good amount of time just looking at the growth in the SMB space, and the great part about it is that while consumer growth is saturating, we see that the small business growth is really starting to take off and continues to take off. Part of the reason for this is there's turnover in SMB. Companies come and companies go, companies start, companies fail. But throughout all this, they invest in infrastructure to actually make the company run. So there's a beneficial cycle that actually plays there. But I think the other part of this is the fact that companies are really changing the way that they work, the process that they work. The ability to actually scale from zero to something very substantial overnight is being enabled by all the cloud services out there, all the infrastructure that you can actually cheaply acquire instead of buying servers. You can buy space on AWS. But at the cornerstone of all this is the connectivity. And while some of this connectivity is very much baked in the wireline world, a lot of the ways that our processes within small business is changing is really driven by the ability to access any of this data, any of these services, anywhere, using any device, and that necessitates wireless. And given that the data usage, especially in this SMB type of context, has more growth legs there in order to actually grow the data use to SMBs, there's an opportunity to upcharge, there's opportunity to come up with more creative data use patterns, and also to change the plan so that it is bundled with other services that SMBs can actually take on, such as IaaS, web presence, unified communication, business applications, etc. So I think the third growth leg behind how the large wireless players are thinking about solving the revenue growth challenge is going to be through this path. Does that mean that's me? Let me pause there.